But first, Anthony Albanese was meant to have called an election this weekend until a cyclone blew away his plans. It wasn't all bad news, though, for the PM. He would have taken some encouragement from yesterday's West Australian election result, with Roger Cook's state Labor government comfortably returned.
He'd still be wary, though, bearing in mind the WA Liberal Party wasn't exactly a formidable competition for state Labor. And there's certainly an argument that Labor was helped by Anthony Albanese's absence, James.
Yeah, well, state Labor performed very well in Western Australia, as they were expected to. You remember they had a landslide win back in 2021. Roger Cook's party won this year 58% of the two-party preferred vote and 40 of 59 seats. So they've set themselves up for another term after this one. They're in a very strong position. But of course, as you said, the Liberal opposition was hopelessly weak, and state Labor were helped by the fact that Anthony Albanese was absent from the election. So can Albanese take some heart? I guess. But, they won in spite of him, not because of him. There was, though, an 18% swing against Labor, mostly in regional areas where, of course, you had those cultural heritage laws that have really upset farmers. And Anthony Albanese would be very aware that the ban on the live sheep export trade will transfer through at a federal election. So I think you're right. I think Anthony Albanese would be encouraged, but he wouldn't be taking for granted votes in Western Australia, particularly, as I said, because of cultural heritage, which is a state issue, but live sheep export, that is a big issue for people in regional areas.
Well, firstly, I think yesterday's result was very unsurprising. Don't forget, this comes off the back of Mark McGowan's emphatic victory for Labor a few years ago.
Yeah.
Even yesterday, Sky News interviewed somebody at the polling booths and they said, well, I'm going to vote for Roger Cook because I like what Mark McGowan did during the COVID pandemic. Now, as a West Australian myself...
Are you serious? Is that what they said?
And that's what they said. Now, as a West Australian myself, I know that WA...
That's something you'd hear in Victoria.
Let's hear something.
That's a Dan Andrews kind of comment.
Don't forget, look, as a West Australian myself, WA typically doesn't like change, happy to stay generally with the status quo. The Liberals have been in disarray in Western Australia for years. They've struggled to recover from the days of the former Liberal Premier there, Colin Barnett. This is not new. We're seeing it across the country in different states too, where the Liberals have really been in the wilderness. So you see in Victoria, Brad Batten's doing very well, coming back and picking up ground. The Liberals only secured one seat last night in Churchlands with Basil Zemplis, or he's set to win it. And Basil Zemplis is touted definitely as a future Liberal leader there. Federally, though, I still think WA is a kingmaker this election. Dutton will definitely be eyeing off West Australia. And simply because last time Albanese was able to piggyback off that popularity that Mark McGowan gave him. In fact, James, back then, the campaigning for federal Labor didn't even have Anthony Albanese's face on it. It was a vote for Mark McGowan is a vote for Anthony Albanese. Well, Albo doesn't have that anymore, and I certainly don't think that Roger Cook's want to be standing arm in arm with this bloke because, as you said, the cultural heritage laws, but also the sheep export. But the issue still remains cost of living. That is still front of mind for voters on a federal level. So despite, he'd be encouraged by that, sure, by last night, but I still do not think, come the federal election, I still think WA is a kingmaker.
Well, it's funny because Roger Cook campaigned heavily on cost of living, but of course voters blame Anthony Albanese for the cost of living crisis. So it may well have helped West Australian Labor, but will it help federal Labor? We'll see in a few weeks.
We will find out in a few weeks, absolutely.